Hey everyone, Tactics here, and in this video I'll be going through Vault of the Incarnates on normal and heroic difficulty, discussing the bosses from a tank's perspective. So I'll talk about things like tank swaps, cooldown, usage, boss, positioning, and just other tank-specific jobs and responsibilities. Whether you're a raid leader trying to figure out strategy, a tank who wants to get a better idea of how the fights look, or even just a DPS/healer player who wants to get a better understanding of what the tanks are actually doing, hopefully this video will help you out. Note that I'll only be covering the first 7 bosses of the raid here, so everything up to Raszageth herself, and that's because Raszageth I'm going to be doing an entirely separate full guide video for, so if that sounds like something you'd be interested in seeing, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss when that gets posted, or even my mythic raid guides, which are on the way as well. So starting off with Eranog, of course, the first boss of the raid here. You'll want to tank him in this kind of donut area between the gray outer line and center. So there's just like lighter colored donut area because of the ads that kind of close you off in the intermission, and because you want to be rotating around the room here to deal with the spawns of flame rifts. You're going to see them come out shortly here on a bunch of different players, and basically when these go off, it spawns a bunch of lava pools on the ground as well as some ads, and basically we just kind of want to rotate around the room away from those. You can even drop those a little bit closer to the boss just to make the cleave a little easier. Because we dropped it so far back, we don't need to move as much. We have a bunch of room here to drop the next set of puddles, but basically you're just rotating around the room, dropping these puddles behind you. Very important that all these puddles are on the same side of the boss so that the tanks have room to kind of kite away from the boss. As you see here, those puddles are getting dropped off, ads are going through the boss, they're getting cleaved down, and then we move a little bit to give some more space. In terms of the tank debuff here, it's just Burning Wound. You can see it right there, and it's just applied by every one of the boss's auto attacks, and I would taunt off at around 6 stacks. It just leaves a fire dot on you for 14 seconds. Honestly, not too noticeable. You can go higher than 6 stacks, probably, but 6 stacks is comfortable for pretty much everyone to do, so that's what I'm going to recommend there. This is a pretty simple boss here. Let's see if we can get the intermission here. So that's would be just after. Basically, you just have these primal flames coming in from the outside, and you're just killing one to open up the area for you to walk through. Otherwise, you get murdered. One thing to note is don't be under the boss here when these actually get into the boss. You see we're all leaving here because they do explode when they reach the boss, and the boss becomes active a little bit earlier, so he can run out here and you can avoid that explosion entirely, and then continue going around the room just like you were previously. Now, let's move on there to Primal Council here. So there are 4 bosses in this area. These 2 don't really melee much, if at all. Occasionally Dathea will actually melee, but not very often. Basically the 2 you're tanking are Embar Firepath and Opalfang, and the big thing here is going to be the tank buster from Opalfang, which is called Crush. This makes you take a bunch of extra physical damage. That's the scariest debuff, and that's what you're going to be focused on taunting off on. And for Embar here, you see that slashing blaze. This is actually a frontal fire attack, so you want to make sure she's always pointed away from your group. This puts a dot on you, but this dot will fall off despite it saying that it stacks before the next slashing blaze goes off here. But we just taunted off here whenever we were swapping Opalfang for that crush. So whenever Opalfang got taunted off, the other tank also taunted off Embar just to make sure that they weren't overlapping the bosses there. But it really wasn't a big deal. Just make sure you have some sort of magic mitigation for when the slashing blaze does go off there. And then we swapped on the actual crushes themselves. In terms of boss positioning here, there's 2 strategies. Like you'll see in the mythic strategies, tanks usually kind of plant towards the middle of the room. I think that's what requires a bit more coordination. So what you do here is we kind of bring these bosses towards the edge, and we'll slowly move around the room here. And basically the goal of this is just to kind of make sure that we're constantly moving as we're running out of space from the nearby pillars and the nearby meteor axes that come off, of course, that spawn fire puddles. You don't want to be too close and pressed up against those. So when those goes out, you soak them, and then you move a little bit away from that. Again, watching that steering blaze cone, notice how we're always positioned towards the outside of the room there. Just shoot that cone off in that direction. And being generally near some of these pillars is actually quite good because it allows melee to easily clear their lightning debuff, the conductive respective marks. And also being close, but not too close to the fire puddle is good because, as you can see here, we need to clear for the blizzard debuff, and you don't want to be right pressed up against it, but you don't want to be too far, so you have to like heroic leap or just dash all the way over there to actually get to the fire puddle to clear. So you want to be somewhat close to these pillars, somewhat close to the fire, but not right pressed up against those things. Note these pillars aren't actually LOS, despite looking like it, so you're not LOSing your healers here by moving past these pillars. And as you can see, we're just slowly moving around the room here. Easier to deal with because you need less coordination in terms of like where you drop the fire puddles, clearing these pillars, that kind of thing. Just in general, it's probably easier to execute in normal and heroic difficulty, whereas the mythic difficulty does require a bit more of that execution on the individual players. So that's why you would do that other strategy there. Moving on though, let's go to Terros. Terros. Okay, so Mr. Earthman here. So in this case, you have the tank debuff of Concussive Slam, and this doubles both as a stacking tank debuff as well as a way for you to clear some of the pillars that spawn. So you see here, we're gonna have a bunch of markers on players, and these spawn these pillars right there. And basically, if you hit these with that Concussive Blast tank debuff here, they detonate, they deal a bunch of damage initially, and they put a stacking dot on the raid as well. So you don't want to stack up all of these and blow them all up at the same time. Usually anywhere from like 2 to 4 at one time is good. The more you do, obviously, the more likely you'd want to commit some sort of raid cooldown to that. But basically, that'll give you a 45-second debuff. So you will need to take 2 of these before taunting off here. So a taunt swap at 2, and making sure that you're clearing anywhere from 2 to 4 pillars at a time here in order to actually get rid of this permanent stacking dot, of course, because the living pylons put that on you. You use that to just kill those pillars, and you're good to go there. Obviously, the boss here is stationary, so there's not so much how you position the boss, but more how you position yourself. You don't want to be strafing back and forth very much with that tank line debuff. Obviously, you want to be hitting those pillars so you can pre-move to where you need to be in order to hit those pillars, just to make your life a little bit easier, and then also kind of already knowing which side of the room here you want to. So this is a test, by the way. I did tell you not to do this. We're testing hitting a ton of pillars. You know, we popped rally, that kind of thing. So like I said, if you want to do this much raid cooldown, but that is a pretty hefty hit, and then we have a big 6-stack dot there. Just testing. But basically, you want to know where you're moving to, because he will do a big annihilation here in 18 seconds. Let's see if we can see that. And it's going to eat up a quarter of the room. So you want to know, are we going left? Are we going right? Clockwise, counterclockwise, whatever. We all move together. And then we do a similar thing in this area of the room here. And notice that we kind of hug towards where the previous platform ended, previous quarter of the platform ended, and start doing a bunch of stuff here to put a bunch of these puddles in this area just to give us more space as we run into the next quarter of the room. But again, fairly simple here for a tank. Shoot the pillars, ideally not 6, and taunt off at 2 stacks of that big debuff there. Moving on, though, we do have Sennarth, the spider. Lots of very, very slippery fight, this one. So you have some ads here on each time you go up the platform, as well as the boss herself. The boss has a pretty massive hitbox, and you won't want to stay in that hitbox the whole time if you're the boss active tank, because the tank hit there, Web Blast, will start going on to other people if you leave the hitbox. But like I said, the hitbox very, very large, so you have some leeway there. And that is true even when you're ascending this hill. Here, the active tank needs to stay relatively close inside of Sennarth's hitbox, otherwise that Web Blast is going to start getting shot at other players. Here we taunt it off at about 5 stacks of Web Blast, perfectly fine for all tanks to do. Note the block tanks can go a little bit higher than that, just because that is a fully blockable attack, but otherwise 5 stacks is pretty good. The one thing I do want to talk about a little bit there is the ad. So let's go up to the next platform here and see that ad spawn. So we have an ad spawn coming up over here. There it is. And what you want to do with these ads is note that they will do a frontal attack that spawns a bunch of ice. So I try to see here if you can shoot it off the edge. That just spawns a bunch of ice around it. So what you want to do is kind of either face them behind you, so back towards this way, or face it towards a spot that already has ice on it, and it'll just put more ice where there's already ice, effectively putting no new ice on the platform. Be careful though, of course, you don't want to point that at your ranged or anyone like that when you're doing it in such a way, because of course it is still a frontal, it's going to hit them. That's not great. As you can see there, that big pull in, the Gossamer Burst. You can use those webs or like a big movement like Heroic Leap, like a Demon Hunter Glide, that kind of thing, to avoid that pull in as well. So be careful of that. Don't get yoinked off the edge. You can also position yourself. I'll try and zoom up here a little bit on the rock when this Gossamer Burst is going to come out. You can position yourself here. The rock stops your fall and you're good to go. Heroic Leaped over to the edge there. Easy as pie. Know that if anyone ever does get wrapped up by taking too many stacks of sitting in that web puddle on the ground, you can take these caustic spiderlings you can see off screen here. They'll leave a little swirly on death, so a tank who's not tanking the boss, of course, can try and taunt one of these spiderlings over to where those people are wrapped, and you kill them there, and it'll free them. The only other thing is when you get to the top platform, I think we actually killed this guy before we might. Let's fast forward a little bit. He'll jump down still. So he jumps down, just tank him right here where he comes down, because the pull in becomes a knockback on this platform. So you basically want to stack up like right here where I am, and both the knockbacks in suffocating webs, which is actually the taunt off now in this final phase, as well as repelling and burst, which is the same as that Gossamer Burst, but it's a pushback on everyone now. You want to be stacked like right here, get pushed down the platform instead of off the platform is pretty good. I know that suffocating webs here will web wrap you, just like I mentioned, so you want to have a taunt swap there, and also then have spiders brought over to kind of clear those players with that swirly. That's it for the spider though, so let's talk about Kurog. And this boss is pretty fun. Basically, you've got 4 sections of the room or altars, and these are just kind of elemental based and have different effects depending on which area you tank the boss in. And note he has 4 buffs here, and each time he's in a specific place, he'll gain stacks of that buff. So if he's in the fire altar, he'll gain stacks of the fire buff, earth altar, earth buff, etc., etc. And you do kind of want to minimize the amount of stacks he gets throughout the entire fight. So that's why you'll be moving from platform to platform here throughout the encounter. You'll know that on Heroic, you'll need to wait at least 20 seconds before moving between altars because of a big Primal Shift damage event that will happen. So just be careful about that. Starting with the Frost altar here is what I believe we go into. In terms of positioning, we tank him relatively central here because we have 2 different camps to deal with the absolute zero soak mechanic, and so we want the camps to be relatively close together here just for stacked healing. As you can see, you've got the F flow, got the healing rain, all that stuff down. Everyone can be inside of one of those and still be part of a separate camp here just for additional healing. Moving to the fire one, we should see in a second here. There it is. So when you go to the fire one, you do kind of want to stay into half or one side of the platform here, as you see, because you will want to use most of this platform when the actual ultimate ability here happens, which is Searing Carnage, kind of like that dance from Council, like Stone Legion Generals, where a bunch of swirlies spawn under certain players, and so you basically just run laterally across this platform. It's going to happen in 20 seconds. You can see that. Oh, a little bit. All right, as soon as this starts happening, we use this whole platform basically, move across, move across, move across, watch that Sundering Strike, of course, so you don't want to cleave your entire raid. Definitely have not done that before, and now you have that space there. Also, as you saw, ranged war or their own camp at the back there, because there are puddles that spawn on ranged DPS, specifically not melee. So again, big cluster there for the ranged. That's where the ranged were. That's where the big cluster of puddles spawn, so be aware of that as well. These puddles do take some time to despawn, so you don't want to like completely surround yourself in those fire puddles. I'll talk about the intermission here in a second. Let's fast forward and talk about some of the other altars first. So here's the lightning area. When you're tanking in this section, you want to go towards just one of the walls here. This is just to provide space for the rest of your raid to deal with a couple of the mechanics. There's a lightning crash mechanic where you need to find buddies, that's on Heroic, as well as a spread for the shocking burst circles that go out. So you just want to give the rest of your raid some space there. That's why you're tanking towards an edge. That's what you're spreading for, of course. Give everyone some space. That's pretty nice. And then we have the Earth one, which is the last one we haven't talked about. And this one doesn't really matter here. Oh, that's lightning still. You go to the Earth. You can be somewhat central here for this one as well to make grouping of these ads, right? These swirlies will spawn ads here, groups them up a little bit easier if you're a little bit more central, and then also dodging that little donut mechanic. Let's see if it should happen in a second here as well. Fast forward. There it is. Basically, this comes out, donut, easier to dodge a little bit if you're central, just for everyone to be close together there. For the tank debuff, let's rewind a tad bit here. It's just Sundering Strike. You would have seen it a bunch of times throughout this fight here. So basically, it's a frontal attack. Make sure only one take is in front. It's also a knockback, and it deals elemental damage depending on where the boss is. Of course, that makes sense. It's thematic. And you want to just taunt off at one stack of that debuff here. There's the frontal cone, and obviously making sure you're not frontal coning your entire raid. Now let's talk a little bit about that intermission here. Let's fast forward. So the intermission is based off of the areas that you were in here. So we were in ice and fire in the first phase. So our first intermission when the boss gets to 100 energy is going to be the ice and the fire ad. So just tank, pick up each of them, bring them together. And the big thing here is tanking these ads, particularly the fire ad and the earth ad when they come up in the platforms or altars, sorry, that you've already used. So here we're tanking in the fire area. We're filling up this fire area. As you see, the fire guy will spawn a bunch of these fire puddles nearby. And again, these last a decent amount of time. So if you took this to like the earth or the lightning area, which we haven't used yet, and started filling that up with fire, it would be a bit difficult for us when the actual earth and lightning phase happen after we've killed these ads. So make sure you're tanking these guys in the areas that you've already used, not the areas you're going to go in. Fire is pretty straightforward. Spawns that ad, get kicks, taunted over. Frozen guy, you do have to stack under there during that big AoE. You aren't running away from this. You're stacking inside that Frozen Tempest. Of course, a bunch of kicks to deal with here as well. Let's fast forward to the Earth guy and the Lightning guy in the second intermission phase here. So here we go. You get a bunch of debuffs here. Again, this goes out on like everyone. Don't forget, even tanks get this. So be careful with that. Make sure you're putting this along the edges here. And again, trying to fill this into areas that you're not going to go to next. Areas that you've already been is the priority there. This lightning guy, on the other hand, will continue to just teleport to other players with lethal current. So I just want to bring the earth guy over to the lightning guy. Whenever that happens, he just teleports a little bit away. Just try and bring him over because this guy's going to start channeling when that happens. Just get some extra cleave there. And that's pretty much this fight. There come the debuffs. Again, tons of area denial. That's why we save earth to do as one of the later ones, because obviously all these earth puddles, definitely more earth puddles here than the fire puddles, and the earth puddles are also much bigger as well. So be aware of that. That's why we did the order that we used. Next up, we have Dathea. All right, Heroic Dathea is a pretty interesting fight. So for normal Dathea, much simpler. There's no ad platforms on normal, so all you really need to do as a tank is taunt off at 3 stacks of that big Zephyr Slam knockback. And note this knockback, it's more strong every stack you get as well. So if you don't have some sort of knockback prevention or gap closer to come back to the platform, you need to be very careful. You will be able to get to the end and not fall off with 3 stacks, but more than that can be a little bit dangerous. That's why we taunt off at 3 here. And then otherwise on Heroic, it gets a bit more tricky because you're trying to time both sending a tank over to the ad platforms and also not having your other tank have a ton of Zephyr Slam stacks. So how we got around that is the tank not going to the first platform. So the platform 2 tank starts off tanking the boss. They go to 2 stacks. At 2 stacks, the platform 1 tank will then taunt off, and then they'll start getting stacks. And at that point, that's when you return to that 3 stacks rule, or immediately after a tank returns from their own platform, because sometimes, depending on how quick you are at those platforms, the tank on the boss can get to 4 stacks, and that does happen. So be aware of that for sure. After that initial 2 stack taunt off, rather, back to 3 stacks or back to taunting as soon as you return from those platforms. In terms of the ad platforms themselves, nothing too crazy going on there. To get to them, you do need to have the platform tank pick up the ad when it spawns. Let's fast forward to that. There it is. There it is. So whoever the first platform tank is, pick this up. If it's normal, just whoever is the not active tank, pick this guy up. Make sure he gets kicked, of course. On normal, you just bring him to the edge and get knocked back onto the platform, so you don't get knocked off it, of course. On Heroic, you want to go to the platform that is active here. It seems to be X, that's where this beam is coming from. Kill this guy, your group goes over, so everyone else wants to be on this side who's not going over, so they don't get knocked off the platform. This group is right here, so they get knocked to the next platform, and similarly, it's just a volatile infuser with aerial slash, not too much of a tank buzzer. It's honestly not too hard hitting. It's a big magic hit, so be aware of that. And we're just grouping these guys here. AoEing them down. Make sure you do kill all of these Thundercallers before you kill the Infuser. That's an important thing. Otherwise, these guys will just keep casting while you're gone. So kill all these Thundercallers, then kill the Infuser, and then get sent back to the platform with this big blowback. Note that this blowback doesn't actually hit anyone on the platform or the boss platform itself, so you're safe from that. And then, of course, you get over here, taunt off. Then from there, the timing should actually work out so that when the platform 2 tank wants to go to their platform, they'll be just having the other tank taunt off of them, and that first tank will have their stacks refreshed. They'll have no stacks left, and they'll be able to go up to hopefully only 3, but depending on speed of that platform killing, could be 4 stacks. So try and have a way to not get completely sent off the platform there. One thing to note is this aerial buffet attack. This will always happen on the main tank if you're not within range of the boss, melee range that is, and this is a pretty nasty nature hit. So for the most part, you won't want to have this go off. So you want to stay in range of Dathea herself if you're the active tank, unless you're going to spell reflect it or something like that. So keep that in mind as well in terms of just your personal positioning there. That brings us to the final boss we're covering in this video. We've got Broodkeeper. So on how this works on normal and heroic, you'll have one tank on the boss for this entire first phase and one tank on the ads for this entire first phase. So if you're on the boss here, Mortal Stoneclaws is the kind of taunt off mechanic. It's not really a taunt off mechanic in the first phase here. It's a pretty short duration. It's a big healing reduction on it is what it is. And so just be aware if you're the boss tank, you're going to have that healing reduction on you for a decent amount of time there. So just be careful when it's actually out. In the second phase, when there's no more ads, you're all on the boss, that debuff duration gets doubled, so you are just taunting off whenever that Mortal Stoneclaws comes out in the second phase. In terms of positioning here, it's mostly centered around the Broodkeeper bond buff. Basically, if any of the ads are within 50 yards of the boss, they get a big damage buff and they constantly heal and they have a DR, so basically they're unkillable. So you want to rotate around the room as the boss tank, killing eggs but staying away from where the ads spawn. Similarly, the ad tank wants to round up spawns of ads and rotate away from where the boss currently is and towards hopefully where your next ad spawns are coming from. Note that these ad spawns are completely static. They will not change between pulls, so you can take that into account. The ad spawns are also going to be denoted, I can show you, by torches lighting up well before the orbs actually fall down. So what first happens is the 2 torches where the ads are spawning light up. Then after that, what happens is the orbs come down where the ads are actually physically going to spawn, and then the ads themselves spawn. So let's see if I can actually get a view of it for you here. All right, this should have a view as we're running over towards this area here. We're watching, going over towards the boss. These torches light up. That means the ads are going to be spawning right here at these torches. Then the orbs show. So the torches actually give you advanced warning. Then the orbs pop here, and then the actual ads jump down into these orb spots, and of course the color of the orbs show what ads are going to be spawning as well. For the ad tank, a big portion of your damage is going to be coming from the proto drakes. So let's actually rewind here. There was a proto drake there. It is those frost proto dragons. They have this chilling tantrum, pulsing frost AoE damage to everyone, as well as this bleed you can see on me right now. This rending bite bleed is the biggest portion of your damage intake as this tank, so keep that in mind. Bleeds, magic damage are going to be the biggest portions of your damage intake as this tank. In terms of the other ads, you have the Flame Reavers here. These guys just spawn a flame sentry, a kind of spinning flame orb line that you want to be away from. They spawn on players, so note that, and they just kind of spin, so stay away from those. And then here you'll see an Earth Reaver spawn, and these guys just have a frontal cone attack that will stun people with tremors, so make sure that's faced away and that you get out of it as well, because you do not want to be stunned either. In terms of what the boss tank is doing here, actually rewind, I think it's at the beginning, we can see it. So basically what will happen is you want to tinker near a couple of these eggs, because 2 at a time will get empowered by the infusion here of the boss. They'll get rapidly incubated, and then the boss will throw down her lightning staff, and usually the boss tank as well as 1 to 2 other players are responsible for destroying either 2 or 3 of those eggs with that laser. See that laser there? It does follow people who use their extra action button underneath the staff, and the tank, and like I said, 1 to 2 other people are responsible for using that to spawn the laser, which follows them and run over the eggs that are empowered with that laser to destroy them before they hatch into more of those proto-whelps. Sometimes you do destroy a third egg, and that's mostly to be able to kill all of these eggs within, I believe, 5 minutes or 13 casts of the staff here to start phase 2 fresh with no eggs. Speaking about phase 2, once all the eggs are actually destroyed, you can bring any remaining adds on top of the boss and cleave them down there, because that healing and damage buff disappears when no eggs are remaining. So once you've killed all the eggs, feel free to bring the boss and the adds together, cleave them down, and then nuke Broodkeeper. And like I said, in that phase, this is only the taunt off of the Mortal Stone Claws, as the duration on that healing reduction has been doubled once all the eggs are destroyed. But there we have it, guys. Hopefully these tank tips did help you out, and if they did, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's free for you to do, and your support helps me continue to make all of this content. I've got a ton more stuff planned for the next several weeks here, including, as I mentioned, mythic boss guides, as well as high key walkthroughs from a tank's perspective, so be on the lookout for all those videos. If you have any questions at all regarding the raid, feel free to drop those down in the comments below, or come stop by and ask me on my Twitch channel at Tactics, where I stream myth progression as well as high keys. Otherwise, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.